It's been over a month since the IL-2 Korea gameplay reveal that I cover here on the channel, and as we get closer to release, the developers have started sharing a new wave of images and footage showing what we can expect from the sim. Now, on the surface, these updates might just look like standard improvements, but once you start going through them more carefully, there are some very interesting details that you don't want to miss. In this video, I'm going to show you huge news coming out from the latest devlogs, including the new city technology and how the scale of the map is shaping up, the level of detail inside the F-84 Thunderjet cockpit, some very important changes to the control system that could make a big difference for new players, and the latest graphical improvements to the environment from terrain and forest to lighting and seasonal variation. Welcome back folks, I hope you're all doing well. Let's start with the video. Let's start by talking about the cities in IL-2 Korea, because this is one of the first things the developers have updated in recent devlogs. The way these urban areas are built is clearly a step forward from what we have seen in IL-2 Great Battle cities, moving away from simple building placement into something that feels much more organic, where entire neighborhoods follow real-world layouts and naturally spread across the terrain. Now, from the air, the building's density is absolutely breathtaking, to the point where it almost resembles real satellite imagery, with clear transitions between the city center, more developed areas over there, and the surrounding residential zones. This kind of structure contrast makes a big difference when you're flying up there at low or medium altitudes, but what also stands out is how well everything blends into the environment, with roads, smaller paths, subtle connections between areas that really make the map feel alive rather than artificially placed, which is exactly the kind of detail you want to have when navigating using visual references or setting up for ground attack missions. The overall scale adds to that feeling as well, with around 800 settlements including 26 large cities, all connected by more than 11,000 kilometers of roads, which is roughly 7,000 miles of roads, so you're constantly flying over terrain that gives you useful reference points instead of empty space. And when you look at how lighting interacts with the cities, especially in lower light conditions, the density of streetlights across the urban areas really helps understand the size and complexity of these environments, particularly in those moments where you're flying at dawn or dusk and the entire city starts to come alive beneath you. Now let's move on to the F-84 Thunderjet, one of the early jet fighters of the post-World War II era, primarily used as a fighter bomber because the team shares some images of the final cockpit model that will be available in the game. Right up front, the first thing you will notice is the A1CM gyroscopic gun sight paired with a radar rangefinder, which was pretty advanced for the time, especially since it can automatically determine range at high altitudes and feed that directly into the sight. So from a combat perspective, this is already giving you a more assisted gunnery experience compared to other early jets in ground strike missions. The main instrument panel follows a pretty classic layout of the era, with your primarily flight instruments across the top, navigation and vertical information in the middle, engine monitoring down below, so it may look a little dense but remains quite readable once you get familiar with it. Around that, you've got the usual systems distributed across the side consoles, with weapons control, fuel management and engine controls on the left, and things like oxygen systems, radios and lighting on the right. And I don't know about you guys, but as far as I can see here, the level of texturing and materials they are showing here is honestly on another level, especially in how surfaces react to light inside the cockpit, which is going to make a noticeable difference since this is where you will be spending most of your time, especially for VR users. If you are enjoying the video so far, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. I will be covering all the latest IL-2 Korea updates and news right up until release. I fly with the Pimax Crystal Super headset, and I do recommend Pimax if you are looking for that next level of immersion in flight simulators. Right now, from April to June, there's also a pretty big discount available on Pimax headsets, so it's a great opportunity to check them out if you have been considering making an upgrade. You can find my link in the comment section along with a discount code if you want to grab one for yourself. And as always, thank you so much for supporting the channel. Alright, let's talk about controls, because this is honestly one of the most important changes they have shown so far, especially if you spend any serious time setting up controls in IL-2 Great Battles or any other flight simulator, and I know you have. What they are trying to solve here is something every simmer knows way too well, which is how painful and time-consuming it can be to properly configure your controls, and instead of simplifying the system by removing depth, they have actually kept the complexity but made it far more accessible and flexible, especially for new players. One of the biggest changes is the ability to assign an unlimited number of buttons to a single command, which sounds simple but is a huge deal in practice because it gives you full freedom to build your own layout without running into artificial limitations. Another really powerful addition is the ability to use axis endpoints as one-time actions, which means you can now use things like your throttle axis or sliders not just for continuous control but also for fixed position commands like fixed flaps or radiators, something that wasn't really possible before and opens up a lot of new ways to configure your setup. The interface itself also looks much cleaner and much more functional compared to what we are used to in IL-2 grade bottles, with proper search tools that seems to let you find commands either by name or by pressing the input, which is going to save a lot of time when you're dealing with complex bindings. On top of that, the new response curve system looks significantly more advanced, with clear visual feedback and more control over how your inputs behave, which is especially important if you are trying to fine-tune precision in things like pitch or roll. And probably the biggest quality of life improvement is the introduction of a setup wizard that guides you through the entire process step by step, detecting your devices and helping you build a usable control layout without having to start from scratch, which for a lot of players is going to remove one of the biggest barriers to entry in the flight simulation genre. On top of that, they have prepared a large number of default profiles for different devices, including joysticks, throttles, pedals, yokes, and even gamepads, which again reinforces the idea that they are trying to make the sim more accessible without sacrificing its complexity. Let's now take a quick look at the environment and nature, because while this usually is not that important for some players, it actually plays a huge role in how the sim feels once you're up in the air. What they have done here is move away from those earlier prototype visuals they showed us in early images into something that feels much more natural and varied, and you can really notice this in how the terrain is built and how everything blends together under the new lighting system. One thing that I really find amazing is the grass and ground detail, which now looks insanely denser and more context-driven depending on where you are, whether you are on an airfield, an open terrain, agricultural areas, and it gives the surface a level of depth that honestly feels much closer to what you would expect from a ground-level game like an FPS or a third-person shooter, rather than a traditional flight simulator. And the same goes for forest and trees, where both the density and the lighting have been pushed much farther, with entire forested areas looking far more convincing both from altitude and from the ground level, which helps a lot where you are reading terrain or flying low. I mean, this even looks like a hunting simulator if you ask me, which is pretty insane. And then there's the sky itself, because the clouds now look extremely convincing with different formation that give the whole scene a much more natural atmosphere instead of feeling uniform or artificial. We already have insane clouds in IL-2 grade battles, but I don't know, there's something about these clouds in IL-2 Korea that makes them look so real and so convincing, and even photorealistic in some cases. And all of this is still built manually rather than using photogrammetry techniques, which makes it even more impressive considering the scale and the level of detail the developers are achieving across the map. So props for the team for their amazing work. And talking about all these nature and environment improvements, the next step is how all these military facilities and structures fit into the map from a gameplay perspective, especially when it comes to targets and mission design. According to the developers, industrial areas and military facilities have been built with a much more cohesive approach this time, blending naturally into the terrain instead of feeling like isolated objects. But what really stands out is the variety of buildings, with factories, storage areas, fuel depots, ports, and even extraction sites like mines and processing plants spread across the map. But more importantly, a lot of these structures are now designed with destruction in mind, including things like smokestacks, cranes, and especially bridges. We now use dynamic damage models, so when you hit them, they don't just disappear or switch to a damage model, they will actually break apart and interact with the environment in a much more believable way. Port and bridges in particular look like they're going to be major points of interest, both visually and tactically, and the addition of different bridge types, including pontoon bridges that can be partially destroyed and collapse over time, adds a lot of potential for more dynamic strike scenarios. And one completely new type of structure for the series is dams, which are not only visually quite impressive if you ask me, but also clearly designed as high-value targets with new technology allowing water flow and damage effects to be represented in a much more convincing way, especially when those structures are hit. So be ready folks, because I reckon strike missions are going to be a hell of a good time in the F-84 Thunderjet or even the F-80 Shooting Star, smoking down these big massive structures. And finally, this is the latest developer update, and honestly one of the most visually impressive ones so far, because they have just revealed how seasons are going to work in IL-2 Korea. Up until now, everything we have seen has been summer, but the full plan includes 5 different seasons. 5 and not just the usual 4, adding that transitional period between the winter and spring or late fall, which is usually very characteristic of the Korean War. Each season will bring a very distinct look on the map, with autumn focusing on those rich, colorful landscape, winter mixing snow coverage in a more natural and varied way instead of a uniform white layer, and early spring showing that colder transitional environment with bare trees and melting snow, which fits a lot of the historical imagery we have from the conflict. But what really makes all of this interesting is how it connects directly to the gameplay, because this is far from being just a visual addition. It is something we will experience progressively over time, especially in the Commander Career mode, where days and months move forward as we play, meaning we will naturally fly through entire periods of the war, with missions taking place in summer, then some missions taking place in autumn, then winter, and so on, which adds a completely different sense of continuity and immersion to the whole experience. I can't wait to play my Commander Career mode and experience all the seasons by myself. That's gonna be all for today's video, folks. I really hope you enjoyed these updates as much as I did. As always, thanks for watching, I'm Brigadier Fox, and see you in the skies.